What if your physical environment significantly influences your emotional and your beliefs, your motivations? Hi, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. What if your home was a significant reflection on where you are in life and where you'd like to go? What if the environment around you influenced your mood, your behavior, how you felt about yourself? Well, it does. How is it that you feel relieved, stress-free, relaxed in a natural environment? Yet in a loud city, there's confusion and frustration and you feel strapped in. Well, it's because our environment significantly influences our perspective, the sensory elements of our body, and ultimately our mood and behavior. That's why I advocate making your home an oasis. You don't need to go to a fancy vacation. You don't need to travel halfway around the world to experience something if those things that you desire were available to you in your own community. Now, I don't have anything against you traveling the world and experiencing different things and different cultures and gaining a perspective that may never be available in your own home, yet your day-to-day living, there ought not be a regret for where you live or how you live. Now, there are different perspectives of this. Some folks surround themselves with all the desires and the things that they want. And being in a city might actually revitalize them. They may want to have the constant movement around them and the new flavors and foods all at their fingertips because they're in a hustling and a bustling city. Yet there are other individuals who would rather be in the country where they don't see their neighbors. They don't see anyone around them. They have seclusion. They have a place where they can go for quiet. Thoreau wrote about his experiences in a small cabin isolated from anybody. It was going away from the hustle and bustle in order to find themselves in the solitude and quiet of nature. Now, I believe humans desire and are recharged by the natural elements, the beauty of a flower, the smell and the fragrance of a fresh field or wildflowers in a field, the delights of fluttering leaves and the way it shimmers and the sun is moving around them in a dance of nature. I do truly believe that is a natural state of human behavior. We all universally admire a Japanese garden that has been shaped with the influence and inspiration of nature, rather than a sterile yard for miles and miles. Every house you pass looks like a cookie cutter of the previous, and there's no emotion or culture in their daily slavery of manicuring a lawn. You know, the diversity of a forest, the observation of a honeybee or a bird. These are things that recharge the human spirit on a deep and primitive level. So why not create in our own homes or around our homes these oases of natural beauty and delight? Now, it doesn't matter if it's the community lake. It doesn't matter if it's a small garden in your own yard. It doesn't matter if it's a house plant in a major city that sits in the window and provides you a filter between the hustle and bustle and the sanctitude of your own home. But you have to decide. You have to decide what is it that you want. Now, I advocate the maximum utilization of land. Now, you can maximally utilize land by putting a manufacturing facility on it, but essentially, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we're going to put in an ecosystem. We're going to put in an environment that is constantly growing and constantly filtering the air and constantly bringing forth new life and experience. I like English natural gardening for that aspect. Those were very functional environments that included both pockets of structure so that a human can move between the garden, even a novice human can move between the garden areas, yet the edges and the borders and the trees all contained an abundance of life. I also believe that we need to have food that is of good quality, ethically produced, and created in an environment where we have not introduced additional stressors. So Joel Salatin talks about pigs being pigs. He raises in Charlottesville, Virginia. He raises holistically cattle and pigs and rabbits and chickens for their meat. Now, you may not eat meat. but it is an essential part of many humans' lives. And ultimately, if you're going to eat the meat, why not know that the animals have been cared for, that the animals have had a good and productive life, and that they've had the chance to, pigs, for example, to root through the soil and to dig up and churn soil and find acorns and nuts and corn and really have an interesting day-to-day life, and that they were holistically or humanely processed at the end. I'm fascinated by halal and by the kosher standards. The understanding that this is a creature that gives its life to us so that we may continue and live, and that it doesn't just apply to the animal, but it also applies to the foods. I'm not sure if you're aware, but China has different standards for vegetables that are exported than vegetables that are consumed in country. And human waste is used on vegetables that are sent out of the country, but would never be used on the day-to-day vegetables that they may eat in their own hometown. There are different systems for processing food, and you'll notice some of these heritage sites that use, for example, the fish rice farming. They're very careful to bring quality water into the system and to have fish that both fertilize the rice and eat the pests of the rice. It's a complete ecological system. They aren't shocking the rice with pesticides and herbicides and then pouring waste into the water. Now, there are people who do this, but there are alternative methods that can produce the same output without a horrendous amount of inputs, without a lot of synthetics. But in the United States, we do spray our rice with pesticides. There was a high level of cyanide in a lot of the vegetables, which was a result of the biological decomposition of pesticides. Years and years of pesticides had actually poisoned the soil, and then that is taken up in the plants. It's how we handle food is not universal. In Europe, for example, the GMOs and a lot of the additives that are in U.S. food are not commonly in the food. In fact, it's illegal to put them in the food. Now, I'm not advocating a governmental system telling us what we can or cannot eat, but I am advocating that individuals educate themselves about not only what they put into their body, but the environment that is around them so that they can have maximum health, maximum clarity of thought, maximum prosperity, starting where they live. So for some people, this might be a small couple flats of wheatgrass that they juice. And others, it may be fresh greens that they produce on a tray. Or for others still, it might be making themselves aware of farmers markets and small farmers in their area where they can get fresh produce that you can actually see how it's grown. India, for example, so China puts human manure on foods that are exported on the fields. Now, I'm not saying that they do this in a way that would be harmful to people and they're being harmful on purpose. I'm just saying there are different standards for the foods they export versus the foods they eat. And so human waste actually does contain a large amount of nutrients, and it does make the food grow better. But here's the thing. The same concept that different countries handled in a more beneficial way. So in India, human waste is actually processed through biodigestion. They also use cattle waste and other animal waste processed through biodigestion to make an effluent, which is a fertilizer that goes in the fields. This effluent is actually the result of a microbiology chain of microbes and creatures that eat the waste and transform it into a fertilizer. This is perhaps a more sustainable system, and China as a whole has this system for their own food, but ultimately it costs a little bit more in planning in order to produce the fertilizer. But again, it's an evolution of the concept that human waste could feed the food. Now, in other environments, there's a great handbook, the Humanure Handbook, that talks about how to turn the human waste through, again, a biological process into soil, and it takes 2 years. So there's different solutions along the perspective. But let's talk about how you would feel. How would you feel knowing that human waste is put on your vegetables prior to, We do have issues of E. coli. We do have issues that evidence that this is actually happening. But how would you feel? And then also, let's say it's neutral and it doesn't matter that human waste goes on because it can be processed and for sure it's been processed. What about the challenge that your food was much more nutritious when it left the farm than when it arrived at the market? So the miles of transportation create carbon, and a lot of people are worried about that, but it also creates a reduction in the nutritional value of the food so that you might be eating food that tastes good, but doesn't actually contribute to your body or to your well-being. So again, let's get back to the environment. Let's get back to the environment most immediate to you. I know a lot of the media wants you to care about the climate of the planet and the environment of the world, and maybe the environment that's being destroyed in one area versus another. What about your own yard? What about the land that you're on? Now, I understand not everybody on this newsletter has land, but it could be the 2-foot square of your patio or the area where you could put some lights up that could allow you a connection with your food, and through that food, the earth itself. Now, if everybody on the land that they own or control was doing things that were environmentally sustainable, that cultivated clean ecosystems, that reduced waste and pollution by perhaps maybe capturing carbon from the atmosphere, if every person did such a thing, it would be a completely different planet, if even half did it. But again, if even just you did it, to you it would be a completely different environment. It would be a completely different planet. Instead of having a lawn that you carefully manicure, what if it was not just a lawn, but it was also habitat and it had mixed grasses in it? It had a variety of clover and other types of plants that when you cut that lawn, it created a biomass that you could then use in a composting system and turn into food. And because you weren't adding any chemicals to the lawn, and because you weren't worried about pesticides, and in fact, the yard itself was diverse enough that pests really didn't cause any damage, you would then know that it was good to be an input to your food system. And then your food became an input to your body. And by the way, I'm not saying you have to have composting toilets or anything like that. That would be an individual choice and depend on your area. But what if you cared a little bit more about your local sewage treatment plant than something on the other side of the planet? Now, there's a little bit of selfishness in this, by the way, because you see your immediate environment every day. What if you could improve that immediate environment? How would you feel? How would you see the rest of the world? Now, you don't have to drive a vehicle less, and you don't have to change your day-to-day habits. What I'm asking you to do is adopt habits that transform your immediate environment to help you get better utility value, meaning you're not just having a lawn, you're having an experience from the lawn. You're having the outputs of the lawn become inputs to other systems. You're creating abundance outside your doorstep. Take it further. You're creating abundance indoors as well. A friend of mine has a beautiful sunroom, and their plants are shimmering. They're just incredible. You can't eat any of them, by the way, but they look great. They got aloe. That you can do something with aloe. It looks incredible, great. And they tell the stories of sitting in there in the morning and reading. They've created for themselves an oasis in their own home. What do you think that does to their health over time? Well, it positively affects their health. It positively affects their mental state. It gives them an opportunity to recharge and to have a touch point in their life that they're caring about something that cares about them. Now, plants aren't necessarily going to care about you in a way that you're going to recognize, but because they are healthy, they're processing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and producing oxygen. They're providing a bit of shade. The green and the way the light reflects off the plants is appealing. Some of the plants have flowers, and you get to see the seasonal changes of the flowers, which gives you something to anticipate the future rather than to stay stuck in the problems of the present. It is a transformation if you're willing to allow it. Now, if you're listening to this and you have no plants in your home and you're worried about killing a plant in your home, choose a plant that propagates easily and just give it a try, because if it dies, you can always turn it into something else. So you take a dead plant, you can compost it. There are systems for composting that we can talk about that you can do even in an apartment. But ultimately, look at cycles of life rather than just moments. And understand that your environment around you influences you. If you have a lot of light, it's different than if you have no light at all. If you have a beautiful view, it feels different than having no view at all. And then work out of your own community. If you don't have a community garden, if you don't have a local farmer, if you don't have quality food, you're in a food desert, for example, you can simply change that. It starts by assessing your desires and starting where you're at home. Even a fish tank with an aquatic environment, you can have that connection with nature despite being in a city. Now, many of my clients have small farms, homesteads, and estates. That means they're going to have like 3 to 5 acres of land. Some of them have as much as 200-300 acres of land. That's an entirely different situation, but you're still going to start at your home. You're going to start in zone 1, your immediate surroundings. How can we clean up those immediate surroundings? How can we make them more advantageous for our day-to-day needs and activities? And that's why kind of an environmental website talks about home management. Because how you manage your home impacts how much free time you have. We could go on about this for another 2 or 3 hours, and that's just the wealth of this topic. But the key takeaway, the one thing that you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself, does this environment serve me? And if it doesn't, what can you do about it? It could be as simple as making your bed in the morning. It could be just cleaning up here and there. If a room bothers you, if the kitchen is messy, clean it up. And then asking yourself, how does this make me feel? You observe it. Now, you might say, well, this makes me feel a little frustrated because I took all this time to clean the room, and I'd feel even better if I had a housekeeper to clean it for me. Either way is progress. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. If you have questions about this program or anything else we cover, I'd like to deep dive into these topics in a way that solves problems in your small farm, homestead, or estate. Are you able to get financial resources, food resources, emotional strength of recharge and wellness from your own home? If not, contact us at www.prosperityhomestead.org. If you otherwise have questions about the topics we've covered today, or even success stories about implementing this perspective of starting in your home, please let me know by visiting www.prosperityhomestead.org. You just go to the contact page and fax me or send me a letter or reach out and just say, just ask the question. We could be getting you on the path of prosperity, the path of your home building you up rather than draining you out. I'm here to help high-income professionals and entrepreneurs transform their home into the paradise they've always desired to get maximum utility value out of their small farm, homestead, or estate. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead.